which was page 18. So a little meditation or a little description of how you would meditate on you know, subtle impermanence, one of my favorite topics. But let's just go back to the definition. So middle of page 18. That which is the three modes is the definition of correct native sign, okay. Then if applied to a base, if it is held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, it is necessarily the same essence as product, and it is the three modes in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, is the definition of correct nature sign in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product. So that's sort of a faithful translation of the Tibetan, but it's not put as clearly as it could be in the Tibetan, and it's a bit worse than the English. The Tibetan's not quite so, you know, tricky. But the tricky thing is, you see, in the first half of the definition, you've got to decide what it is referring to. If it is held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, it is necessarily the same essence as product. So it there refers to the explicit predicate of the probandum. Like whatever is the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, that is necessarily the same essence as product. So I could have translated whatever instead of it. I could have put whatever is held, but the Tibetan uses that phrase, if it is held, you know, that's their standard phrase. So it there refers to the explicit predicate of the probandum. So that if it is held as an explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, it is necessarily the same essence as product. Yeah, but then in the second part of the definition, and it is the three modes in the proof of sound as impermanent by the sign product, it there refers to the sign. So the it there in this sign would be product. So the first it is referring to, you know, well, impermanent, for instance, the explicit, whatever is the explicit predicate of the probandum. And the second it is referring to product, the sign. So you might think, oh, that's a bit of a weak translation. If there's two it's like that, they both have to refer to different things. You know, you could get confused. Yeah. So, but I say in Tibetan, they don't put it in a simple way. I mean, it's short in the sense there's just two bits to it. In a sense, it isn't such a long definition, but in Tibetan they could have put it in a more kind of, you know, easy to explain. You know, they could have put the second phrase first, you know, and then it would have been easier and so on. But I'm just trying to follow the Tibetan. So this is a warning to people who haven't got their minds around it. So it in the first part of the definition is referring to the explicit predicate of the probandum, and it in the second part of the definition is referring to product, you know, the sign. So they have to be wary of that.
What's the first it then? It looks like there's three it's. The first, if applied to a base, if it.
Yeah, well, the first and the second refer to explicit predicate of the probandum.
Yeah, okay.
If it is a pot, it's necessarily impermanent. So if it is a pot, it's necessarily impermanent. It there refers to pot, doesn't it? Whatever is a pot is necessarily impermanent like that. So the first two it's, if you like, then refer to explicit predicate of the probandum, or whatever is that. And the second it refers to product. So I don't like the hold you back. So that's the definition of correct native sign. The proof of sound is impermanent by the sign product. Yeah. So I'm just asking now, what is the same as, you know, what similarities does that have with the correct effect sign, and what dissimilarities? Well, you know, that's usually left for you to work out if you're doing this on a debate level. You know, people don't explain things so much, but I'm going to explain it a bit just because we're in a completely different situation here. So the similarity between this one and the correct effect sign is related. So what is related to what? I don't think you have the definition of related in the Yong's and Purbachov's collected topics. They don't give you one. They just again, that's something they leave you to work out. They give you a definition of related as the same nature or same essence, and they give you a definition of subsequently related or related as this arising from that. You know, the reflect relationship effect to cause. Has anybody got a definition of related? Just the general overall definition. Jan, for instance.
Yeah, wouldn't it be
Or say what related to functioning thing?
Then if it's related to functioning thing is if functioning thing doesn't exist, then it would not exist.
That's more or less it. Yeah, I mean, in Draper and Loseling, where they do give you a definition of related, the overall definition which applies to both types of related. First of all, they say if it's okay, it's related to functioning thing means it must be different from functioning thing, and by the power of functioning thing being reversed, then it is reversed. So you said non-existent, but you know they use the word reversed, which amounts to more or less the same thing, I think. So first of all, if it's going to be related to functioning, it's got to be different from functioning thing. So that's very simple. It's just like functioning thing isn't related to functioning thing, you know, just avoiding that kind of, you know, unnecessary, you know, qualm, really. Something can't be related to itself, you know, there's got to be two things in a relationship, after all. And when you say it's different from functioning thing, that implies it exists, of course, you know. If it's different from functioning, it necessarily exists. So rabbit hole can't be related to functioning thing. Okay, so that's that out of the way. Then the main thing, and then by the power of functioning thing being reversed, it is reversed. So if you say pot is related to functioning thing. Is reversed. You know, so if there's no functioning thing, then there won't be any pot. That kind of idea. Or you know, gold pot is related to pot. So gold pot is different from pot, and by the power of pot being reversed, then gold pot is reversed. So if there's no pots in the room, if you remove all the pots from the room, then there won't be any gold pot left. So that's related, but that example is related of a relationship of same nature. Then if you think of smoke and fire, it's just the same, yeah? Smoke is related to fire because it's different from fire, and by the power of fire being reversed, smoke is reversed. No fire without smoke. Sorry, no smoke without fire. So if you reverse the fire, there's no fire, then you know you can't have any smoke. You see, so that's those two. That's the similarity between the two. Whether it's a relationship of the same nature or a relationship of, you know, effect to cause, subsequently related, or however you translate it. Then inspired by the power of one being reversed, the other is reversed. Yeah. So which way around has it got to be? Well, the sign has always got to be related to the predicate, right? By the power of the predicate being reversed, the sign will be reversed. Yeah. On the smoky past, there is fire because of smoke. So if there's no smoke, then there's no fire. Sorry, there's no fire, then there's no smoke. If there's no predicate, fire, then there can't be any smoke. Sign. They say, oh, yeah, consider the thing that, you know, whatever, one with related. Yeah, so consider the subject, sound, it is impermanent because it's a product. with the power of it, the impermanent being reversed, then product will be reversed. Or, you know, it's the subject, you know, my pot, you know, it is impermanent because it's arisen from the power of exertion. So, you know, if impermanent is reversed, arisen from exertion is reversed. That means arisen from exertion is related to impermanent, right? Impermanent isn't related to arisen from effort, because if you remove arisen from effort, you could still have impermanent. So you work out which way it is. You know, the signs are related to the predicate, so that, you know, the predicate pervades over the sign. Yeah. So that's just the overview. You know, what has got to be the relationship? You know, in a correct sign, there's got to be some unshakable, you know, relationship that one requires the other. You know. So that's what we're getting at with this related. That's the key to it, I think. You know. So let's think about that a bit. So instead of it being, you know, the effect is related to the sign, you know, the sign can only be there if the predicate is there. Like the effect can only be there if there's the cause is there, the cause exists. Instead of that, then you've got this relatedness of same nature. That the, you know, product is there because impermanent is there. No, what am I saying? Yeah. Yeah. By the fact of product being there, then that implies that impermanent must be there. See, no impermanent, then no product. But if there is product, then there must be impermanent. So seeing the things as product, then you can work it out that it's impermanent. So, you know, that being a product is in the very nature of being impermanent, you see. So that's where you got to figure out when you're working out the pervasion on top of the butter lamp. You see, anything that's produced, just like this butter lamp, anything that's produced then must be in this nature of, you know, constantly going out of existence, just like the last night of the butter lamp. Yeah. So that's just you know, sort of giving you the overview. I mean, I can tell you all that, but you know, in debate, you'd have to sort of work that out and really kind of, you know, come home to you. And then when you study Dharmakirti and the commentary on valid cognition, then they start to really intensify and stress on that. You know, this is kind of it's all encapsulated in his verses. So there are just those two types of related. You know, if you study collected topics, you know, you've got those two types of related. You've got related as the same nature, and you've got related as from effect to cause. According to the sutra follows, anyway. I mean, maybe you can say the prasangikas, you know, the consequences, a little bit different take on it, a little bit more complex, but we won't go into that now. But actually, you've got three types of correct signs. So you've only got two types of related. So why have you got three types of correct signs?
Graham?
Yeah.
I just quickly check something.
Yeah.
So, pot is related with functioning thing as the same nature.
Yes.
But functioning thing is not related with pot as the same nature.
Right.
But could you say that functioning thing and pot are related as the same nature?
I wouldn't say so. No. They are the same nature. We discussed that last week. You know, they are the same nature. Pot is the same nature as functioning. Functioning is the same nature as pot. They are the same nature. But related is the same nature. That's the extra thing that you have to actually be aware of. Related is the same nature. One, you know, the presence of pot necessitates the necessitates the presence of functioning thing. But functioning thing doesn't necessitate the presence of pot. You know, you can have a functioning thing, plenty of functioning things there without pot being there.
But
yeah, so that's
pot and functioning thing are related as the same nature.
no.
So you would only say pot is related with functioning thing as the same nature.
I would, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and the definition, I was sort of hinting at this last week. It just says, oh, the sign and the product, the sign and the predicate of the probandum, explicit predicate for the probandum, just got to be the same nature, same essence. It says at the definition. Yeah, which is true. You know, once it's a correct sign and the explicit predicate of the probandum and the sign are the same nature, but they're not negative phenomena, keeping out of the way of negative phenomena, these positive phenomena, then yeah, it will be a correct nature sign. But this idea that because it's a product, why should it have to be impermanent, you know? So then you have to have some relationship where they're related, you know? It's not just the same nature. They have to be related to the same nature, like the sign must be related to the same nature as the predicate. Yeah, so you couldn't have, you know, pot as a predicate and functioning thing as the, you know, as a sign very easily. Yeah. Thing in my table is a pot because it's a functioning thing. You see, there's not, although pot and functioning thing are the same nature, they're not, you know, it's not like functioning thing is related. There's the same nature as pot. So they won't be a correct sign. You know, functioning doesn't necessitate the existence of pot. Functioning isn't in the very nature of being a pot, you see. Nor is it an effective pot. See, so that's how you have to sort of be aware of. And when you're working out the pervasion, you see, that's what you're working out, that in the end there's this relationship of necessity. I don't think it's just like you go around counting all the you know, examples of smoke in the world, and then counting all the examples of fire in the world, and going everywhere there's I've seen smoke, there's fire, and you just have to go through every example, and then you can say, now there's a pervasion if the smoke is necessarily fire. Because you can't do that, you know, it's infinite. There's two number of amounts of smoke and fire in the world that, you know, you can never count them all before I can realize this pervasion. I have to count all the examples of smoke and all the examples of fire. You know, you never do that. You have to work it out. It's in the very nature of smoke that it has to come from fire. See, so that's kind of, you know, sort of these kind of debates you have about proving the pervasion, which are all very, you know, important, you know, because then you have to force the mind, you like because it's a dependent arising, it cannot have any inherent existence, and the mind's so resistant to that, you know, it just clings to inherent existence as if that's the only way things could be, really, and it's such a natural assumption. So, you know, that you have to see the function thing necessitates no inherent existence. Really keep trying, you know, applying your mind to remember that again and again and again until you break down your habitual kind of resistance to it, your sort of unconscious grasping at inherent existence. So it's by saying that, you know, dependent arising necessitates, it cannot have any nature by way of its own power at all. Is, you know, it's that's the relatedness, you know, the necessity. One necessitates the other. So that's kind of what you kind of keep, you know, focusing on. Okay, so that's enough about the sign then, and we'll come on to how there are three types of correct sign, but only two types of relatedness when we get to the next one, which is non-observation signs, the third type of correct sign, which is coming up in a minute. But first, there is this division of correct nature sign. So there's two: correct nature sign, which involves a particular, and correct nature sign, which is free of a particular. So those two divisions, those two names aren't very informative. So we have to go to the definitions. So that's bottom of page 18. The first, so that's a correct nature sign which involves a particular. The first, on the basis of it being a correct sign, the term which expresses it indicates its own agent. Is the definition of correct nature sign which involves a particular. So the term which expresses it indicates its own agent. So in you know, sound as impermanent as a product, then we're talking about the term product. So the term which expresses the correct sign in that particular case. So what is the term that expresses product? Well, it is the word product, sound product. So that sound, when you hear the sound product, does it express its own agent? Well, what exactly does that mean? It's hard to say. Anyway, before we get to our examples, we have a division. So we've divided, there are two. So all of these correct signs here in this division are term, the correct sign, the term which expresses it indicates its own agent. But if you divide it, there are those two. The term which expresses it explicitly, or the term which does it implicitly. The term which expresses the sign, does it express the sign explicitly or implicitly? Oh, we're in darkness here. What on earth are they talking about? Well, we have examples. This might help a bit. I'm not sure how much, but we'll try. Arisen from exertion is a correct nature sign in the proof of a sound of a conch as impermanent, in which the term which expresses it explicitly indicates its own agent. So the subject, the sound of a conch, it is impermanent because it is arisen from exertion. So the sound of a conch is arisen from exertion then. Yeah, so that's, we understand arisen from exertion to mean arisen from by a person, arisen by or by a being, yeah. Arisen from exertion is supposed to mean by the exertion of a person. Like say the wind blew the tree over, right? So, but that wouldn't be like arisen from exertion. Like exertion is more the exertion of a being, a person. The wind is just some sort of impersonal kind of event. But when we say arisen from exertion, it implies a person. So maybe you can say that does explicitly indicate its own agent, because if it's arisen from exertion, it's necessarily done by an agent who's actually a person, or essentially a being. But it's not really very clear to me, yeah? Sound of a conch, it is impermanent because it's arisen from exertion. So that arisen from exertion, the sound expresses agent. Well, this is sort of implicitly, or no, there must have been a person or a sentient being doing it. That's sort of implicit. You just kind of, arisen from exertion. If it arises to your mind correctly, I think you think you're supposed to think, oh yeah, well somebody's done that then. It's like the sound of a conch. Somebody has to blow the conch, don't they? Anyway, that's explicitly, and then product, just the end of that paragraph. Product is a correct nature sign in which the proof of sound is impermanent, in which it implicitly indicates its own agent. So product, you get the idea it arises from cause and conditions. So there's not necessarily the idea that it has to be a person or a sentient being or a creature or something doing it. It's just a product is produced. Some things are produced with the agency of a person making an effort. Some things are produced without the agency of a person making an effort. So what's going on? So that's implicitly indicating, the sound of a product in that sign implicitly indicates its own agent. So the agent, I don't know, the agent has to be a person. I'm not sure. The agent probably not. The agent could be a machine or a kind of, a tool or something. I don't think the agent has to be a person. If it's arisen from exertion, then there has to be a person behind it doing it. But just if it is produced or made or done by an agent, it could be like the tool that is being used, or just the one that's doing the action. which doesn't have to be a person. Yeah, so you can see this isn't really that clear to me. I've never had a good explanation of this, never seen a good explanation in a text. So I'm not spending too much time on it because it doesn't seem to be some sort of crucially important kind of distinction. Secondly, so this is where it's a correct native sign which is free of a particular. Second, on the basis of it being a correct sign, the term which expresses it does not indicate its own agent. So we've had explicitly indicating and implicitly indicating its own agent. Now we have does not indicate its own agent. So on the basis of it being a correct sign, the term which expresses it does not indicate its own agent. There's a definition of correct sign which is free of a particular. Functioning thing is a correct native sign, and the proof of sound is impermanent, which is free of a particular. Yeah, so a functioning thing, you say, oh, functioning thing, it doesn't really sound like, it really lead you in the direction of thinking, oh, there's an agent here that's done something. Functioning thing doesn't really sort of imply kind of an agent, but I can't say any more than that really in helping you to understand the distinction. I think Gendon Rubin is Dharmakirti commentary. He maybe tries to make this into a, give you more explanation. But that's the best I can do at the time being. So I don't remember having a good, clear kind of explanation of that, but I don't think it is anything terribly important, really. So you got sound, it is important. Sound, it is impermanent because it's risen from exertion, or the sound of a conch. And sound is impermanent because it's a product. Sound is impermanent because it's a functioning thing. So those are the three suggestions anyway. So let's leave that one there and go on to correct observation signs. So these are the third group of correct signs in this preliminary division. Now we've got correct signs, and we go on to from correct signs we go on to similitudes of signs or quasi signs. Well, actually, we go on to different ways of dividing correct signs. Sorry. So this is just one way of dividing correct signs. The main way, division of correct signs by way of entity. Then we have different ways of dividing correct signs before we go on to the quasi signs. Sorry. So this is the third in this group of three then, non-observation signs. So thirdly, with respect to correct non-observation signs, there are two definition divisions. First, it is a correct sign in the proof of that, and also there exists a common base of being held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of that by the sign of it, and it being a negative phenomenon. Yeah, so that's the big deal here, negative phenomena. Has to be a correct sign, has to be the three modes in the proof of that. But then there has to be a common base of it being held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of that by the sign of it, and being a negative phenomenon. So I wonder if it is the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of that in one of these signs, it is necessarily a negative phenomenon. I would have thought, but it says, the common base type of expression. There's a definition of it being a correct sign in the proof of that. So can anybody give me a correct non-observation sign and an example? What about you, Paul?
Sound is being because it is a product.
Sound is its product. Follows that as a correct non-observation sign.
Except
So it follows that product is a correct sign in the proof of sound being empty of permanent.
Accept.
And it follows there exists a common base of being held as the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound as being empty of impermanent, empty of permanent by the sign product, and being negative phenomena.
Yeah, accept.
So posit the common base. It is the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of that, but in the proof of sound being empty of permanent by the sign product, and it is a negative phenomena.
Yeah, well, I would. I thought empty of being permanent is the explicit predicate of the probandum.
Yeah, and is it a negative phenomenon?
It is a negative phenomenon.
So it is a common base of being the explicit predicate in the proof of sound being empty of permanent by the sign product and being a negative phenomenon. Yeah. So if you've done collected topic properly, you have the sort of correct, whatever you call it, clear idea of what it means to be a negative phenomena. But maybe a lot of us haven't done that. But a negative phenomenon is one that where, in order to realize it, you have to negate something. You have to, bring something to mind and ask if it's there. And if it's not there, then you've got to you realize negative phenomena. Empty, permanent, but not permanent. You see. So then you have to realize, you say, when you think of not permanent, you have to think of permanent, and then say, oh, it's not here or something. He's not a monk, yeah. So you have to bring monk to mind and say, oh, he doesn't fit into that category. That's not a monk. So is that the process of sort of excluding somebody from a category that has to occur. So that requires, you have to have the category there and then say, oh, it doesn't fit into that category. So then you have, when you realize something like that, then you realize negative phenomena. Yeah, so it's usually easy enough to recognize. I mean, there'll be some debates about it and different types of negative phenomena, but we'll come to those when we get there. But basically, it's not so hard to recognize. It's like empty of permanent or not permanent, lacking permanent. Any of those words sort of describe sort of negative situation. Yeah, so I'd have thought, if you say you sound it is empty permanent because it is, or it is not permanent because it is a product. So would you say in that sign, if it is the explicit predicate of the probandum, it isn't necessarily a negative phenomenon?
Not permanent, except.
So it would, so the subject impermanent, it follows it's not the explicit predicate of the probandum in the proof of sound being empty of permanent by the sign product.
Except.
But doesn't somebody who realizes that sound is empty of permanent automatically realize that sound is impermanent?
Why? No, why?
Well, it's just somebody who knows that sound exists, right? It's not like somebody's like a rabbit horn, It's not so rabbit horn is empty of permanent, therefore it is impermanent. But if somebody's realized, the correct second party, whatever they are, correct opponent, correct other party, maybe. What do I say? Maybe say correct opponent in this text. Can't remember. So they've already realized the three modes or something. So they're not worrying about whether sounds does it exist or not. So doesn't that person, once they prove the sound is not permanent, don't they automatically realize it is impermanent?
If they realise that it's a product, then yeah, I guess they can realise that if it's not permanent, that it's. No, I say that they don't necessarily realise that it's momentary, impermanent.
Okay, it exists, and you've refuted permanent on that subject, but that means you're still wondering whether it's impermanent or not. If you refute impermanent on that subject, that existing subject, can you still be wondering now, is it impermanent or not then?
I think so.
Do you do, yeah?
Mhm.
Well, that's the whatever it is. What do they call them? The drum dog, the superimposition. Yeah, the thing actually is impermanent. So you grasping it to be permanent is like that kind of the superimposition, which is falsely kind of imposed by your mind. So then you remove that superimposition, you refuted it by impeccable logic. You got the antidote. Say, it can't be permanent because it's a product. But then would you still be wondering if it's impermanent?
I think so, because not because the opponent realizes that sound is a product, that he necessarily realizes that sound is impermanent. It is like that because to realize that sound is impermanent means that you've realized subtle impermanence, momentary change.
Yeah. Well, if you refuted permanent, then you haven't just refuted gross permanence, you've refuted all types of permanent. There's no permanent left on, not a shred of permanent left on sound, because you've refuted it. So you can't refute permanent and still have, and the person who's refuted permanent on sound can't still be grasping whether, maybe sound is subtly impermanent. Because he's refuted all permanence. There's no superimposition of permanent left on sound. So how's sound going to appear to him then? Sure, it's got to appear to him as impermanent. And, he's going to be realizing that. Like if you refute red on something, like, no, this object I'm talking about is not red. You refute red on it, and then you automatically realize it's non-red, don't you? Or if you non-red upon it, then you automatically realize it's red, because those two are just directly contradictory. Permanent and not permanent, permanent and impermanent. Red and not red. So if you refute red on it, then it's necessarily not red. And if you refute not red on it, then necessarily is red. Automatically. Not like you have to then wonder, I've refuted red on it. Does that now mean that it's not red? You automatically realize it's not red. Don't you? So I'd say somebody like who realizes that sound, it follows, is empty of permanent because of being a product. And there will be people who think like that. You're trying to realize sound is impermanent by the same product. Then you might realize that there is no product in the dissimilar class of permanent. Yeah, whatever is product is excluded from the dissimilar class. You might work that way in genuine case. But there's nothing that's a product could be permanent. Yeah, because anything that's a product is just it's unable to be permanent even for a tiny moment or something. You could think like that. But once you realize that sound, it follows, it is not permanent then because it's a product, then you're not still doubting, or not still wondering whether it's impermanent or not, because those two are directly contradictory. Yeah.
Does it follow that it follows then if somebody realizes that the pot is not permanent,
Mm-hmm.
they necessarily realize the subtle impermanence of pot?
Yeah, they would necessarily realize it's impermanent, whether it's subtle or gross, it would be impermanent. Yeah. Because they removed all clinging to permanent at all, every shred of clinging. Otherwise, they haven't refuted permanent, have they? You can't just refute gross permanent. It doesn't change very often, but it just changes at a subtle level. But they're still clinging to it, thinking it changes at some subtle, very fast level. Then they haven't refuted permanent, have they? I mean, is that what I'm trying to say now? That's not quite one. That's a bit of a mix-up, isn't it? Can you refute gross permanence but not subtle permanence? Yeah, I mean, it's the opposite, isn't it? So you refute that it never changes, because it does change, but only occasionally. But in between the gross changes, it doesn't change at the subtle level. So that would still be grasping your permanence. You know, you don't say it never changes. So it does change sometimes, but only occasionally, like when the hammer hits it, or, you know, it gets cold and cracked because it freezes or something, you know. So you don't accept that it is, you know, always permanent, but you're still clinging to the fact that in between the gross changes, there are times, episodes when it stays permanent, because you don't believe in subtle impermanence. But if you're still on that stage, you've only got to that level. You haven't refuted permanent on it. You've only refuted, you know, a sort of a gross level of permanence, but you're still accepting a subtle level of permanence. So you haven't refuted permanent. But if you have said sound is empty of permanent, or because it's a product, then you've got to, you know, say, well, it must be changing all the time then. And that means you've realized it's momentary, it's impermanent. Yeah, so it's like it's got to be either A or not A. So if you refute it's A, then it's got to be non-A. And if you refute it's non-A, then it's got to be A. So that's this directly contradictory business. And, you know, so I'm saying you refute that it's permanent, you say it's empty, you realize it's empty, permanent, but then that means you also realize it is impermanent. So you could say impermanent is something that person realizes on sound at the same time as they realize that sound is empty of permanent. But this impermanent, the explicit predicate of the probandum there. And they will say, no. Implicitly, you realize it's impermanent. Yeah. Or if it's the other way around, you know, if it's a correct nature sign without any negatives in the way it's set forth, this is a correct nature sign. So sound, it is impermanent because it's a product. Sound is changing all the time because it's a product. Implicitly, then you realize it's empty of permanent. You know, if you realize it's impermanent, you realize implicitly, you realize it's not permanent. Nobody's saying it's not permanent, they're saying it is impermanent. But the person doesn't have to wonder, after they realize it's impermanent, they don't have to wonder, is it permanent or not? They've already realized that, just implicitly, without vocalizing it, you know. So, but that wouldn't be that's the difference between explicit predicate of the probandum and implicit predicate of the probandum. So explicitly not permanent, implicitly impermanent. See, so that's kind of a rule somehow, that when the mind's operating in the mode of realizing a negative phenomenon, it can't be realizing a positive phenomenon at the same time. With the object of realization, the explicit object of realization is a positive phenomenon. You can't have a negative phenomenon as an explicit object of realization at the same time. So one will be explicit, one will be implicit. Both, can you say that they're both the predicate of the probandum, because the person realizes both of them on sound, you know, same time. But here we're talking about the explicit predicate of the probandum. So the one that's vocalized, the one that's, you know, spoken, is the in this case, it's got to be a negative phenomena. The predicate of the probandum, right? So the sign can be negative, the sign can be positive. That doesn't matter. It's not the sign being negative or positive. It's a predicate of the probandum. It's what you are proving on the subject. So what we're proving on the subject here is not permanent or empty of permanent. So that's the thing that's got to be negative. The sign may be negative, maybe not. That doesn't matter. Okay, so that's a little bit about the the definition there. So you can see that's the third type of correct sign. Sound, it is empty of impermanent, or sorry, sound is empty of permanent, or you just say not permanent because it's a product. So if it's a correct sign, there's got to be related. You know, the product has got to be related to not permanent. Not permanent is a phenomena. Product is a phenomena. So how is product related to not permanent? Yeah, smoke's related to fire, product's related to impermanent, or arisen from exertion is related to impermanent. So how is product related to not permanent? Any idea, Thomas?
How is product related to not permanent? The same essence.
Is product related to not permanent?
Yeah, except
The subject product, it is related to not permanent because
they're different, and if not permanent did not exist, product necessarily not exist.
so the subject product follows different from not permanent.
Except
The subject, and if not permanent did not exist, then product will necessarily not exist.
except
Yeah, I think that's true. If not permanent didn't exist, then how would product exist? But if product didn't exist, would not permanent necessarily not exist?
except
Except
yeah, non-existent.
if product did not exist, would not permanent necessarily not exist? Pardon?
Yeah, why?
So if product did not exist, not permanent would not necessarily not exist.
Except
Example?
horn of a rabbit.
Oh, no, rabbit. Tell me the horn of a rabbit exists.
Why?
Well, you can take away all the products, but there's still a non-permanent existing in that place. You've taken away all the products, but still in that place a non-permanent exists. Let's say example, rabbit horn. Anyway, that's the one. The crucial question is, in this case, if product doesn't exist, does not permanent necessarily not exist? No, sorry, the other way around. If in this case, the predicate, by the non-existence of the predicate, is a sign necessarily non-existent. Yeah. So if non-permanent doesn't exist, does product necessarily not exist? So that's okay. That's not so problematic. Okay, so they are related. So in the sense that product is related to non-permanent. So product being related to non-permanent, is it related as the same essence as non-permanent, or is it related as an effect of non-permanent, subsequently related to non-permanent?
Same essence.
Pardon?
It's same essence.
What did you say, Hannah-Lee? Is product related as the same essence to impermanent?
Yeah, I would accept.
subject product, it is related as the same essence to non-permanent because?
If they both could appear to a direct perceiver, they wouldn't appear separately.
That's a bit iffy, though, isn't it? Iffy. Yeah. What's the definition of being related as the same essence to non-permanent? Yeah.
One, they exist when it exists, and two, they're the same essence.
Well, that's not the definition of being related to the same essence.
I think it's different within being the same essence.
Different within the same essence. Okay.
Different within being the same essence, and if not permanent did not exist,
Then
product would not exist.
Yeah, it's a three-part definition, that one. Some in one way of saying it, yeah, it is different. So that product is different from non-permanent within being the same essence as non-permanent, and if non-permanent didn't exist, product would necessarily not exist. Yeah. So the different, no problem there. Now the same essence. So product is the same essence as non-permanent because, Jakob?
Because it's same nature, but not permanent.
Yeah. Anyway, you can see that just as product and impermanent are the same nature, you can still say that, you know, product and non-permanent are the same nature. Even though there's a negative there, it's still the same nature. It's not a cause and effect relationship. It's definitely a relationship of one nature. So you can say then that in that particular non-observation sign, what is the relationship between the sign and the predicate that sort of, you know, guarantees that what's that kind of relationship of necessity? What's that criteria of necessity between the sign and the predicate? And it's like a relationship of, you know, one being related as the same nature to the other, the sign being related as the same nature to the predicate. So, and that's true of all of these non-observation signs, actually. They're all relationships by way of nature. You know, because even when you say something like, you know, you know, there is no smoke because there's no fire. Yeah, in the positive way of saying it, the correct effect sign, you know, on the smoky path there is smoke because it's fire. But then if you have a sign going the other way around, you know, or there is no smoke because there's no fire, then the two things you're dealing with is no smoke or non-smoke and non-fire. And those two, you know, they're not related as cause and effect. Non-smoke isn't the cause of non-fire, and non-fire isn't the cause of non-smoke. They're related as the same nature, just like product and non-permanent when you think about it. So once you've got a non-observation sign, it seems like there's no possibility of relationships to cause and effect, because we're just dealing with this negative phenomena. So it's true to say that in all non-observation signs, this relationship that we were just looking at a moment ago at the beginning of the lesson is always a relationship of one being, you know, the sign being related to the same essence as the predicate. So in a way, you could say, well, doesn't that mean then that all these non-observation signs are just correct nature signs? Because there's nowhere in the nature sign thing saying, oh, it's got to be a negative phenomenon. It's got to be a positive phenomenon or something. You know, it should really say in the correct nature signs that it's a positive phenomenon they're talking about. So that then all the leftover negative phenomena can then be correct non-observation signs. But again, it's like, you know, an omission from the definition of a correct nature sign here, just to be tricky, you know. if you remember the definition by the first Dalai Lama of correct nature sign I gave last week, it is a correct sign of a positive phenomena in the proof of that. And whatever is the explicit predicate of the Prabandham, the proof of that is necessarily a Paveda that is the same nature as it. So Dalai Lama is giving a more complete definition. He's putting positive phenomena in. And the Dogma-Loseling, you have to just apply that yourself. So if it's a relationship of the same nature, and we're talking about a positive phenomenon as the explicit predicate for the Prabandham, correct nature sign. If you're talking about, where the relationship is, the sign being related to the same nature as the predicate, but the predicate, explicit predicate of the Prabandham is negative phenomenon, non-observation sign. Yeah, so although we've only got 2 types of being related, you can say you've still got 3 types of correct sign. Okay, so that just make that clear. Yeah, so it's worth making them into a separate category though, because there's so much riding on this question of negativity, like negative proving something, like refuting a negandum, like, it's not inherently existent because it is a dependent arising, or, it's not self-sufficient, substantially existent because it's neither one with nor separate from the aggregates or something, So all these signs about selflessness, coarse selflessness, gross selflessness, or subtle selflessness of the prasangikas, the predicate of the Prabandham is a negative phenomenon, so they are given special treatment, because that's it's really kind of a key sign, the one above all you want to realize, the emptiness of inherent existence, or selflessness. So it is, it's put into a category of its own, so they can be studied separately. Yeah, okay, so that's the general definition of non-observation signs in general. So it's pretty easy, really. All you have to know is the explicit predicate of the Prabandham negative phenomena. So the implicit predicate of the Prabandham, that can be positive phenomena. The implicit one, So you refute permanent, but still that means at the same time you're realizing impermanent, but that's not the implicit, that's only the implicit predicate of the Prabandham, because what you've actually said is sound is not permanent. So, your explicit predicate of the Prabandham is the negative phenomenon all the same. So you remember that, then you've got the sort of basic idea of the correct non-observation sign.
Mr. Graham, could I ask, it's a negative phenomenon if the definition is also a negation, not just that it's an explicit negation in the definiendum.
Yes, that's true, isn't it?
So even like permanent then would be a negative phenomenon. So if I say something, because it's kind of a common locus of phenomenon and non-momentary.
Common locus of phenomenon, non-momentary, yeah. So that's
So if I say like space is permanent because it's uncompounded, that would be a non-observation sign.
What to say about that? I would have thought the subject sounded is permanent because it's a product. Sorry, what did you say? Enclosed space, it is permanent
because it's uncompounded.
Uncompounded phenomena or something, yeah. That would be correct. That would be a non-observation sign, yeah. It's usually they say if the definition is a negative, and the definiendum, even if it sounds positive, is not. Like they have the synonyms for reality, for emptiness, don't they? Like reality or Chunyi, how else would you translate that? Reality or yeah, so when the definiendum sounds like it's a positive phenomenon, but the definition is negative, then that phenomenon is usually counted as a negative phenomenon. But permanent being a negative phenomenon, I don't remember people saying that really. But one goes to the phenomenon non-momentary, phenomenon which is non-momentary. So you see, you have to negate momentary to already realize that. Yeah, I provisionally say that permanent is a negative phenomenon. I haven't got any backing in sort of sense I remember that being said and discussed.
Sheila,
Yeah.
it's the same as with impermanent. This sounds like a negation.
Yeah, and in Tibetan too, mitdagpa. But you go to the definition, you see that's momentary, like kechigma just means momentary. So the definition doesn't have really any hint of impermanent, negation in the definition. So then, according to most schools, impermanent is definitely a positive phenomena, even though it might sound slightly negative. But I think the Drepung Gomang, they try to argue that impermanent is a negative phenomenon actually. So you have to, if you look at their signs and reasonings, there's a few debates, but they're just out on a limb. You know, they're trying to keep a specialized position, which isn't the kind of general acceptance. You notice anything in Catherine about that?
I'm just thinking back to penance and the negative phenomena.
Yeah.
Definition permanent, a common locus of a phenomena and the non-momentary.
Yeah.
So is that an affirming negation? A phenomena, and then what are we doing? We're negating non-momentary. I don't know. Does that make it? So would that make it an affirming negation? Because if it's a negative phenomenon, isn't it the case that it's either non-affirming negative? Or
Yeah, there's two kinds: affirming negative and non-affirming negative. Yeah, affirming negative means that although you negate something, you are left with some sort of with something. Yeah, I would say that's an affirming negative. Like if you say it's not inherently existent, then all you're saying no inherent existence, you're not implying anything in its place.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't inherently exist, so you don't imply that anything positive about that. But if you say it's a phenomenon that's not momentary, then you are left accepting it's a phenomenon. But I would have to look that up, yeah. But yes, you had non-affirming negative and affirming negative. That's there's two different kinds. So we should have it investigate that before class next week. Make sure I have a bit of a clearer idea about that. Yeah. So when we did collected topics, we didn't really study the whole chapter on negation of positive and negative phenomena because that was in the middling topics, but didn't really want to go. Didn't seem to be such an essential kind of chapter, but maybe it is. Here when we get to these negative predicates that are random, we should know what we're talking about. Yes. Okay. Well, that's just about our time for this week. So we'll try and get a bit clearer idea of what negative phenomena are, and yeah. But there's only two types of correct non-observation sign. There's a correct non-observation sign for the non-appearing and correct non-observation sign for the suitable to appear. So non-observation sign, what do you think it means? It's what It just means non-existence, like you're proving proving something to be non-existent, I guess, really. Non-observation, not observed by valid cognition. It's a sign where there is something not observed by valid cognition. The predicate, right? The predicate of the negandum, what you're negating. Yeah. There's no permanent on sound. So it's like a recognition of the non-existent of permanent on sound. So it's recognition that permanent is not observed by valid cognition on sound, I guess, so that the non-observation thing is the non-observation of something in the predicate position. Because the sign might be inexistent. You know, the sign could be existent, it could not. It could be the sign could be a negative or a positive phenomena. The sign's got to sort of exist. Yeah, the sign's got to be there. But then there's two types. There's a correct non-observation sign for the non-appearing and the correct non-observation sign for the suitable to appear. So of those things that are not observed by valid cognition on the subject, there are signs where you're dealing with something that can't appear on the subject anyway, for you at least, and some things which, you know, if it were there on the subject, it would be suitable to appear. But it doesn't appear, so it's not there. Anyway, there's these two types, you see. The first one is a bit specialized. It's not the correct non-observation sign for the non-appearing. That's a bit weird and wacky. Flesh eaters and all that, cannibal eating demons or something. And the correct non-observation sign for the suitable to appear, that's the more straightforward one where your signs about emptiness and everything come in. So that's the more kind of, you know, the less complicated one, although there are many divisions of that. So it does get sort of more involved because it's longer, because there's many divisions of different types. But that's where your emptiness signs would come in. But first we have to attempt to understand a little bit about the correct non-observation side of the non-appearing. So that's a little bit more, a bit weird and wacky, as I say. Okay, then we'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.
See how we go.